what developing countries need from a finance perspective, promote structural transformation is the ability to raise public funds and the ability to build banking systems that retain credit creation under public control so that this can be channeled into structural transformation, including at the local and lower levels. Why is it so difficult to achieve this? Why does microcredit become what it has become in terms of the largely, essentially fraudulent business on large business? It has, of course, to do with the reason why developing countries find it very difficult in other areas to develop or to adopt seriously developmental policy, namely because they have very little policy space in the current global economy to do so. We have, from a financial point of view, on the one hand, an international monetary system that has been operating under a lead currency that remains a lead currency for historical reasons, but that has not fulfilled that role for the past 30 years, but has instead abused that role systematically over that period. The idea of a lead currency is that the country in question puts collective global interests above national interests, and the opposite, of course, has been the case ever since the 1970s. That is, from an international economic perspective, one of the reasons, of course, that on the other hand, corporate rentierism, financialization, i.e. the ever faster expansion of short-term financial interest and profit as well as rent-seeking into areas that would have been recognized as belonging under public control, including development policy, but many other areas, of course, has been able to expand to this extent, and has also been a context in which the current volatility that we see in international financial markets, the exposure to international financial markets, the abandonment of advanced country sense of responsibility for providing adequate and substantive development finance has been abandoned. We must, of course, forget that once these mechanisms take place, and in the microcredit case or micro-debt case, that is very obvious, especially in smaller developing countries that anyway operate with relatively young, sometimes weak institutional structures. A massive presence of these microcredit institutions puts pressure on a nascent public monetary and credit creation system anyway. So there come pressures from below in micro terms and pressures from outside, exogenous in terms of the international monetary system. So when that is the case, it's obviously very difficult to see that there can be the kind of national, perhaps regional, international policy or coordination that would be required to provide adequate development finance, and that would be an agenda, an alternative agenda that first of all scales development finance up in a very massive way. Secondly, that makes sure that that development finance is channeled to domestic investors and to the creation of domestic investors, or even a class of investor that can create the profit that can be reinvested in that economy, and not towards shareholders of dubious large corporations with the capacity of lobbying those in charge of development agenda worldwide, and including in the UN, has to be said. Now, we looked very briefly towards alternatives if we will not have a political consensus at the international level to tackle some such difficult thing as the international monetary system fast enough for there to be a response to the urgency of the need of development finance. What can be done? And we're looking into, and I won't go into too much detail here, we're looking into what developing countries amongst themselves can do. One that does not take away the demand of responsibility on advanced economies, but at least what can be done in terms of mechanisms to strengthen regional internal credit creation to be able to gain some, at least some more independence from the dollar in particular, and a number of possibilities, but also then in that context at subnational development banks, banking systems, decentralized banking systems geared towards specific sectors, for example, and that are tied in with cooperative or union-based credit, local credit institutions. So the argument there is largely that if there ever is to be a bottom-up transformation, and I think one has to be reminded of some skepticism. I'll just say one word more on this. But if there is to be a what Milford referred to as bottom-up transformation, there has to be a very dense network at the local, at the national, at the regional level in the South, and that of course calls on the agenda from a UN perspective, South-South cooperation in this case in the context of development finance as a matter only for developing countries and not a matter for advanced country to have any discretionary power. Even if this was possible, and it's certainly what we're saying is we've got to start moving, and in the current situation that is a place to start. That does not mean that there does not have to be another form of transformation at the global level, and there is just nothing that will move us forward that does not include the reining in and basically the elimination of what we have described as corporate rentierism in decentralized international financial markets. So whether we like it or not, that certainly is not something that should be understood to therefore not be on the agenda, but to get started bottom up also is an option in our view. Thank you.